Hi there. Welcome to Mushroom Hour. Today on Mushroom Hour, we're here with Jasper Degenaars from Fungi Academy. I might have to edit that out. I don't know if I can ever say that name right. We're here with Jasper from Fungi Academy.
You did so good.
Beautiful. He's joining us all the way from Guatemala. We're here in the studio in Petaluma on 103.3 KPCA Public Access. Amazing that we can virtually have Jasper in studio, someone who's been massively influential, and I am stoked to talk to. Jasper, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, man. Thank you so much for having me on, Darren. It's an honor. It's been a while in the making, I think, but finally we're here.
It has been a long time in the making. We've had some conversations. I think we did one on an Instagram live. That was really nice. We've had some conversations. So yes, it is definitely about time we get a podcast on the books. And really there's so much to talk about. I've always been super curious about your story. Maybe that's the best place to start, because I know Fungi Academy. We know in the mushroom community, everybody knows what the magic that's going on down there in Guatemala. But I'm really curious how you hooked in with the crew, where Jasper's story started, and how you found yourself in the Mycelium Collective down there.
That's a good question. I think it's the best place to start is just at the beginning, and like how I got into mushrooms and how mushrooms kind of shaped me. So I'm from the Netherlands, which it's a very good place if you're a mushroom lover, because for a long time Psilocybe cubensis was legal, and right now the truffles are legal, but also mushroom cultivation is legal. So I had like a very classical, like Western upbringing. Was very depressed as a teenager, and I was feeling kind of lost with purpose. And one day I got offered some truffles by a friend, and he and even though it was kind of like what I would like to call a museum dose, what some people like to call a microdose, as something a little bit above a microdose, it was like very profoundly life-changing. And I had like such a nice day, and I felt just like kind of stoked about life and happy after. And I think I did the same thing that most very enthusiastic 18-year-olds do when they find something new. I told everybody about it and all my friends. And
of course,
I started like getting them for my friends, and we started doing these, not very conscious about it just yet. We just go eat like truffles and hang out in the park and smoke some cannabis and, do whatever 18-year-olds do, is to not be at home. But like we only had like very good, like very pleasant experiences. So it felt very safe. And during the same time, I was reading on Arrowwood. One day, I walked into my friend's home, who was a little bit older, and he had like one of those mushroom grow kits, which you can get at the Smart Shop in the Netherlands, which is basically just like fully myceliated grain spawn in a little plastic container that you then take the lid of the container off and you just spritz, and then you have a nice flush of mushrooms growing. And he had them. I came in at the same time that he was growing them. And then like, I was like, oh, this is amazing. How'd you get this? How much did it cost? And I did some quick calculation. I was like, oh, this is actually cheaper than getting the truffles. So I started buying those, and I had my first one under my bed at my parents' place. And then I found out about the shroomery and like Mycotopia, and I was going on those forums a lot. And I found out I was buying grain spawn. So when I did some coca-cola inoculations, and they were also successful. So after that, I was kind of like super into mushrooms. I found Paul Stamets' talk at TED. I think that was from 2008, how mushrooms can save the world. And not long after, I had like what I like to call a solo ceremony now, but in reality, I was just taking some psychedelics and playing video games by myself. And I had like the sort of like higher self tell me this kind of voice, like felt like coming from the outside. You can also call it like the spirit of the mushroom, or like the spirit of the psychedelic. Tell me, like in Dutch, like ga reizen, which means go travel. And I was not super happy in a job, although I was like financially stable. I had great friends, but I felt like there's something more that I need to get out of my early 20s. And I did the thing that I tell people not to do. The next day, I quit my job and booked a one-way ticket to Thailand. Which was actually great. I thought I was going to be gone for like 6 months. I was gone for like a big rite of passage. But then in Thailand, you have Psilocybe cubensis that grows wild. And I was there in the jungle, and I found some elephant dung, and I saw a mushroom growing from elephant dung. And I was like, wait, I know this mushroom.
I know what this means.
Yeah. So I was just, going foraging in Southeast Asia, Australia. I was doing some woofing in Australia, and I helped some people set up like kind of a homestead, set up some a small mushroom operation just with like oysters. And like it's kind of just kept going like that, like, oh wow, I'm really interested about the whole natural world and permaculture and history, and mycology was a thing, but I never thought it was the thing until I was been traveling for a year. Like, wow, I cycled throughout Europe and did some other crazy things, and I tried to get from Seattle all the way to the Amazon without flying.
Whoa.
So I hitchhiked the whole west coast of the United States, and near Nevada City, I actually traded a sweater I had, which was kind of bulking my luggage because I was walking and like hitchhiking. So you're trying to reduce all those things you have. And I had this sweater I was never wearing. So I traded it with this guy for mushroom chocolates. Then I found this guy that was willing to take me on his sailing boat to Mexico. So we did that for like a couple of weeks.
What?
And then I ended. So this is a big part of the story and like how mushrooms are related. So I ended up in Mazatlan on like the west coast of the Sea of Cortez after the sailing trip was complete. And I was couch surfing with these two girls. They had like a tiny pet pig, and they told me not to have any food on the ground. And I had like this bag of food that I kept separate, but I had completely forgotten about this mushroom chocolate that I brought from the United States that I left in a bag right next to all my bank cards and credit cards. So we were having dinner, and this pig is making noise from the room I was staying in, and it all clicked, and we pulled this pig off, and luckily it didn't chew through the bag, but it like destroyed my bank cards. And I was using PayPal with friends, and in Oaxaca I found out about the Fungi Academy. There's a big sticker in San Mateo in the mountains of Oaxaca, close to San Jose del Pacifico. It's kind of like the mushroom capital for a lot of people in the mountains of Oaxaca, Mexico. And I was like, okay, Fungi Academy. I didn't know existed. I wanted to go to Atitlan. This is where I'll go. It took a while before I got back. They got back to my email, but they say, okay, you can like stay with us. And I was very stoked because I'd never done much of the lab work yet. So I got to Guatemala, and I immediately got an email from PayPal that I was locked out of my PayPal. So I didn't have bank cards or credit cards, and here I was at like Fungi Academy, Guatemala. I didn't have any money. So I was kind of forced to be stuck until like a solution presented itself. And then I started like learning, and then I started teaching, and Oliver taught me so much, and he immediately, like within a very short time, trusted me to like do the weekly workshop, and then eventually ended up moving to this property, which used to be an ashram. Now we call it the ashram. And then we started doing courses together, which felt overwhelming because I was like, well, I've just been learning this lab stuff for like 6 months or so, 8 months, but I've been doing it like hours and hours every day. But actually, like teaching has been the best way to learn for me because it shows me
100%
how many holes my knowledge has. And then when somebody asks a question I can't answer, I'm like, oh, I don't know, maybe I should look this up. And like really rapidly, and it was also a motivator. It's like, I don't want to be the person in front of the classroom and not know the answer. So it was motivating me to just learn. And here we are 5 years later. And yeah, we lost Oliver along the way, and we're here like continuing his legacy.
That story is wild. Thinking of the pig going after the magic mushroom chocolate while Jasper, I mean, knowing you a little bit and like seeing you and your energy, I'm like, this all fits. And somehow when you're like, oh, then my PayPal got canceled and I was forced to stay at the Fungi Academy, I'm like, thank the gods that you were able to like go there, at least make it there. And then, who knows what forces conspired to make sure like, no, stay here, Jasper, just stay. And yeah, and of course, there is that whole story of the beautiful kind of brotherhood you formed with Oliver, and Oliver Merivale was on one of their first mushroom hours. And really, he and the Fungi Academy team that kind of did the opposite of your trip. They were going the other way, like up the west coast of America from Guatemala. That's where I bumped into him, and that started me on really my mycology journey, was running into them, playing with grain jars and growing mushrooms at the Pioneers Conference here in Marin. Yeah, just amazing story, and love what you had to say about, the fact that being the teacher forces you to become intimately familiar with the subject matter. So yeah, the best way to learn something is to teach it. But especially when that's part of that is hands-on, right? With mycology, I feel like so much of it deepens when you're actually touching and working with the mushrooms every day like you were.
Oh, for sure. It's like, I like to call it a practice more than a knowledge, because I was doing it so intricately every day. Like that was part of my morning routine. And this is even way back with, it was just me and Sam, the mushroom man. We were in the lab together, and we would do like an hour of yoga, have breakfast, and then we just do our lab practice. And that would just mean infinite agar petri dishes that like we were doing this in a moldy lab that was a half underwater, because this property that Fungi Academy was like calling home in that moment had a lot of issues, and mold was definitely one of them, which is very ironical almost. So we learned kind of in the hardest conditions, and we still managed to make it work. And I think that practice was so crucial to getting the muscle memory down, to start understanding the organisms that we're working with. Okay, what do they like? Do they like nutrients? Oh, but they don't like too much nutrients, because then bacteria come in that are like more efficient at eating these nutrients. And like, I really started to get to know the fungi as a growing organism by just working and looking at them every day and seeing what the parameters were that they, were thriving in the most.
Now, the lifestyle there in Fungi Academy, I mean, is that something that you were used to? You kind of laid out how you were of this classical Western upbringing. You were depressed. You were in like, I don't know, I think of kind of a mainstream Western European upbringing. So then what was that like that transformation process of being the traveler, going around the world, landing at Fungi Academy? And maybe you weren't conscious of it at the time, but how did that kind of transform you going through that process? And I guess how long was it too? Like, how did this shape kind of who you are today?
Yeah, it was a big one. I think it was there's many rites of passages that I had. And I think that traveling was a real fundamental part of it. Is like not only like being on my own and kind of throwing myself in the deep, but like like in Southeast Asia, after like 7 months in Southeast Asia, I fell in love, and this girl was going to Australia, and I didn't have the money to go to Australia, but I really didn't want to go back. And then like I got to Australia, and for the most part, I was like the brokest I've ever had, until like spending my last cents and kind of meeting the right people in the right time that kind of were doing this van bohemian lifestyle. And like depending on them, because I was staying in their van, we were dumpster diving, and like kind of learning how to let go of control was a very big one. And then, the seeking adventure and lots of things, lots of time, right? Because like I didn't really fit in the classical educational system. I was very understimulated, and I felt like, wait, I have to do this for 4 years. So the freedom that travel offered me was just being able to read a lot of books about everything that interested me at the time, choose my own adventure, like university, and University of Life. So of course, like all those experiences and seeing different cultures and tasting different foods and seeing how other people live all around the world, and knowing what it is to be dependent on like basically homeless and broke on the streets, like taught me so much about like what really matters in life. And I think like I was just on a journey of like, I just want to experience right now and give myself challenges while traveling. So, like it doesn't become stale. So the hitchhiking in the United States, that was my first time in the United States, was very interesting, because in Seattle, everybody is very much like a Seattle, like how people imagine somebody from Seattle. But then you get into rural Washington, and like I was on a hike with some friends, and then we came back after like multiple days and running out of food, and it being way colder than we anticipated. And we finally sat down in a diner, and this guy with a classic cowboy hat walked in with like holding his belt buckle in like a shitty diner, and he's like, I'm here for a business meeting. And that cracked me up so much. So like all those experiences, right? Like I think for me, who I am, and I've lived in intentional communities and I've done non-intentional communities, coming to Fungi Academy and within months kind of being offered the manager position taught me so much about what it is to work together with a team, and like how to be community, because like there's a lot of my shit that I was projecting onto others and all that stuff. Like the community life is such a house of mirrors. Yeah. When you have an issue with something within yourself and you live like very closely together with people and you work very closely together, like that is coming out in your relationships. And that is why a lot of these intentional communities break real fast, because people don't have the tools of, for example, authentic relating, nonviolent communication. And very happily these ideologies and these practices are becoming more popular because they have given me so much in my life, because for where I'm at now, conflict is inevitable. And I'm very Dutch in that sense. I'm very direct. And that's already a conflict with, for example, people from the West Coast of the United States that tend to be more, let's say, less direct.
Yeah.
Learning how to deal with that has just been so fundamental of who I am right now. And of course, like all along the way, the mushrooms have truly been my teachers of just showing me, okay, this is the path. This is where you have to focus on right now. And also like, this is where you suck at, dude. I was so bad at like communication. I was just how I communicated was received very violently for a lot of people. And the mushrooms were able to reflect that back to me. And then it really hurts, and I really appreciate the sacred mushrooms of mainly the genus philosophy that are able to give me, and it seems to be a lot of other people, this kind of like bird's eye view of your own life, this third person perspective. How it relates is, if you see a friend that's addicted to smoking cigarettes, you can see how bad it is for them. But when you're that person addicted to cigarettes, you're like, well, but I've worked so hard and this just feels very nice. And mushrooms are able to reflect that mirror back to you. And like, I don't know where I would be without like all those lessons.
A beautiful kind of lesson to pull out of that. And I was thinking, you just referenced kind of that psychoactive experience with mushrooms and how intentional and beautiful that can be. And just then in your story, in pursuit of these organisms even more broadly, like even outside the psychoactive context, just getting inspired and wanting to kind of pursue these organisms had led you, or is one of the threads on this almost like mythological journey of this wild Dutchman who went out in exploration for something meaningful and then somehow landed in working with mushrooms and now is able to share that with so many people. There's just a lot of lessons there. And I'm constantly reminded of this great like folktale, the story of Fatima and the tent maker. I think basically this woman that keeps crashing on the shore in a boat, but everywhere she crashes, she picks up a new skill, and then she thinks she's going into the next part of her journey, and then she like crashes in a storm and picks up another skill, and then finally lands in a place where they need all of her skills, and she's able to like be the chosen one for that community. So I find some story of Fatima and the story of Jasper. But just to give some context, because we are broadcasting here on Public Access in Petaluma for any new listeners, we've been talking about the Fungi Academy, quickly and glossing over it because I know so well what it is. You are one of the embodiments of it, and I think a lot of listeners will know what it is. But what is the Fungi Academy, and maybe like what it is today in terms of the work you guys engage in and what that community looks like there in Guatemala?
Yeah, it's always a big one because it's always transforming, right? So
yeah, what is it? It's everything.
It's everything, right? I think it's like a Mycology Education Center is the gist, and like that makes sense to most people. And then Oliver and I, when we try to give it like really a name, it's like we call it a sacred mycology school. And like sacred mycology to us just means finding meaning and purpose in your life through the help of mushrooms and fungi. Yeah. And this doesn't, like, a lot of people, like, they look at our branding, and like I'm very open about being a real big fan of psychedelics because they have given me so much. But like, it doesn't have to be that, right? I've known so many people, including myself, like I don't find more purpose in my life than being out in the forest and looking for edible mushrooms with my friends. That's so meaningful because I'm connecting to my local ecosystem. I'm like finding purpose because it's like connecting to something that's deep inside of us. Is like connecting to the ecosystem and getting food to take back home from the ecosystem. I think that's just so meaningful as it is. So for us, a big focus is mushroom cultivation. And that's because we here at Fungi Academy really believe that if everybody was able to grow their own food and medicine at home, we have a very different world. And like, I think with mushrooms, that's very, very accessible, because not everybody might have the luxury of a garden, but everybody can hang some oyster mushrooms in their shower and like get a couple of pounds of oyster mushrooms every week.
Right.
You know, like that is accessible. And like, I think that's what makes it really interesting, by connecting to these organisms that are so alien in so many ways, and showing how much of an impact they have on our ecosystem and our life and our planet. And that's also one of the reasons why last year we made the Fungal Ecology course, because there's so many people right now that are interested in mushrooms and mycology, and like so few people that like actually know the depths of what mycorrhizal fungi do, right? And it's becoming more and more like in the forefront and like mainstream media, but like people might know what a mycorrhizal fungi is, but people know that like it seems to be very likely that mycorrhizal fungi acted as the roots of plants before plants evolved their own roots, because we have fossil evidence of mycorrhizal fungi almost 50 million years before we have fossil evidence of the first plants with roots. Like that to me is just
wild.
Blows my mind, right? It's wild.
Yeah. Well, and it's amazing to have you guys be that touchstone, or how do I want to say this? You know, so many times when this has emerged right now in the public consciousness, it's always kind of that commercialized aspect of it. And you could argue that's even happening somewhat with the psychedelic experience, where people are writing books and holding courses just about that element of it, of just like, here's this thing you can consume that gives you an experience. And yeah, I think for so many people who have really gone down the mycology rabbit hole, you almost instantly hit people with like the classic, all mushrooms are magical, or like, oh, that's like the tip of the iceberg. Like, you need to understand really what these organisms are all about. And I think that's always been intrinsic in Fungi Academy's work, but I've seen that the past like year or two, that shift to like, hey, we've been kind of having this really concentrated offering on cultivation, on helping you engage with, you know, psilocybin containing mushrooms in a really intentional, safe way. But now, like, look, we're going to just tear the lid off this thing and just go into everything about mycology and that course offering about fungal ecology. I mean, it's so broad and there's so much research and experts. And I really love to see that kind of huge opening for you guys. And so, you know, you have the cultivation, but now you have this education piece. What is the current course offerings? You talked about that last year. Is that something people can still access, or tell us about like the educational modules Fungi Academy has, how people can engage with it?
It's a great question. So really like to believe that like if you get something, especially online, you should just get it, right? And like there was a lot of courses like, oh, 6 months and you lose all the video material or anything. It's like,
right.
Especially with mushroom cultivation, we wanted to create something that people can go back to. It's like, oh, if they've not done an agar transfer in 6 months, and they can just go back to the course and watch the video. It's like, oh yeah, that's how I have to do an agar transfer, for example, right? All of our courses in the online course lingo are evergreen. So you can just get it, and then you have like a full-length video course, which ranges from like, I think the Fungal Ecology course is almost like 4 or 5 hours of material videos. And then we have like per module, we invited an expert. So we have Juliana Fursey teaching, we have like William Padilla Brown, we have a lot of scientists. So we have Dr. João Arujo, who is like the world expert on Oviocordyceps, so the zombie ant fungi, talking for the module on parasitic fungi. And like, we really wanted to make an offering that people have like a solid foundation to learn more what's next. And so it's basically like just video materials that you can watch at your own pace is the online aspect. And actually you can check them out for free now if you want to. We have like a free sneak peek of all the courses, because we really like to have quality, but then sometimes it's hard to be like, well, it's closed off, so you can't really show the quality. So we just decided to give some of the modules away for free if people want to check that out. So yeah, that's the video side of the things, and that's something that we really like. What I really care about, like, learning needs to be fun, right? And I got like pushed away from the traditional educational system because it was just boring. Even like the subjects I really liked, if I had a boring teacher, it was boring. So like, I think we all have less attention span that we might have had like 25 years ago because of the smartphones. So we try to make it like engaging and fun and like snippy and with some humor in it. And so that's basically the online side of things. And then we also do these mushroom master classes in season. So we try to like invite a specialist from out the field to just like share their little piece of wisdom. So for me, those are really fun to create. They're really like a lot of work. Like I do all the script writing, and then we have a companion workbook with it as well, which is like for the Fungal Ecology, the workbook is like 200 pages. And then for the mushroom cultivation course, it's something similar.
Yeah.
And then with Julian Vane, we created the psychedelic journey workbook for like the course for maybe people that never had psychedelics and have like a real, what's the way, like what's the mindset that you have to approach that with. And those are great. I love making those. They're very tiring to make because there's like a lot of things to juggle. But then we also offer our in-person courses, which like I really, really love those. Just to have people over here and kind of show them the lifestyle that we live, but also have them leave with a skill that they can be quite pivotal in like their like local communities. We had somebody from Alaska. We have several people from Alaska that like are growing mushrooms now in kind of a food desert, right? Like those things are just really inspire me. And we have done many different ones. We have done a sacred space holder program for people that might like want to learn how to hold space for themselves or for like their loved ones. Because right now, you know, like a lot of places in the United States are decriminalizing, Oregon legalized. It just doesn't seem to be accessible, right? Like $5,000 for one session. Yeah. And if people might want that, you know, I think we can all learn to be better for our own community, honestly. That's a whole nother rabbit hole. But what I think is like a really cool offering that we have as well is the Human Mycelium Retreat, which is really focused on like how to implement authentic relating, leadership skills, nonviolent communication to become that node in your network, right? And like it's really been amazing to see that like all over the United States and even in Europe now, people are popping up as the mushroom person of, I just have like just think of Jacob from Oklahoma Fungi, right? Like, oh, wow, he created a mushroom movement in Oklahoma, right? And everybody can do that.
Right.
Wherever you are, like you can create a mushroom movement. We just try to like guide that with like, okay, how do you approach building community in many senses? So yeah, it's growing. I always have too many ideas. That's what our team here tells us. Like, okay, maybe you have enough ideas. We have a backlog of ideas. Let's just try to focus on a couple of things here.
Let's try to execute each one. Well, it's all though, to me, it's education. I love that part about like teaching better interpersonal relationships because you guys are in, like you said, you're in that kind of, what I want to say, you're in that environment, that kind of like pressure cooker of we're in an intentional community. We have to live together. We have to navigate these things. So in terms of interpersonal relationships and building networks, like you might be some of the experts because so many of us now can be so disconnected from people in the world around us that it really is a gift, like something you can teach aside from the mycology. Look, we've been kind of in this small area with a lot of people and learned how to make it work. Let's share that part of it too. And I think those are absolutely invaluable skills and things that I think some of us assume that you learn when you commune with sacred mushrooms that I find a lot of people don't seem to learn and need to get more familiar with. So I love hearing that. And I love that there is that kind of in-person dynamic to it because online courses are fantastic. Like you said, you can always go back and reference them, but nothing better than being like in that collective effervescence with people live. I mean, especially Lake Atitlan in Guatemala, hanging out with Jasper and the team. That's going to be like a transformational experience. For you, becoming that educator, what's that been like? Because I'm wondering, like, how did you figure out what the offerings should look like? I mean, we've heard some of that story of how you like developed your skills and got shaped as a person. But when we talk about making courses and things like that, I mean, that's whole industries built on that. And you're someone who did not fit traditional education models. So how have you learned how to kind of piece together useful materials and share things in a way that really resonate with people and impact people? What's that journey been like for you?
That's a great question. Like apparently when I was a little kid and people asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I said two things: a world traveler and a teacher. And you did it. I made both of those things. And for a long time, I was like, oh, I'm never going to become a teacher. So I feel like it's something that's to an extent innate, but there's also a lot of amazing books on it. Like there's a really good book that like the moment I started teaching, Oliver basically shoved down my throat. He's like, you should read this, which was like Make It Stick. And it's all about like the science of learning, which is great if you just want to learn yourself, but also like if you want to share knowledge. And I think a part of that is just like, okay, how do I break it down into segments, right? Because I feel sometimes we want to just share and it gets everywhere, and like we share amazing story of our lab and how all the bits and pieces, and then oh yeah this, oh yeah that, and like I think the more clear we are as educators, the better it is, and the more fun everybody's having. And you know, sometimes and often we get people come to our courses that then like we're at the day of like, okay, we're just pouring agar and inoculating agar today, and people are asking about like humidity and intervals and like temperature for the fruiting room. Is like, okay, I could answer that question in lots of detail right now, and then half the class would be like, what the hell are they talking about? Or I can just tell them like, okay, wait, we have this in the program, it's going to be later. If you have questions that feel urgent but you might feel like they're far ahead, maybe write them down. And often like for me, like a big part of it is like, what do I want to get if I would go to a program like this? What do I want to learn? How do I learn? And then kind of sketching that out. Because this book, Make It Stick, taught me that like by asking questions when you, for example, are reading a book, and this is what I did with Radical Mycology like twice, great book by Peter McCoy. I wrote it down. It's like, instead of writing the answers down to questions, read something and then try to formulate a question of the answer that you just read, and then write down the question and see if you can formulate that.
Interesting.
That has actually like been one of the best learning techniques I've ever had. And this also creates in like scheduling out, right? So with programs and courses, it's basically, but for example, the Fungal Ecology course, what I did is, okay, I just started very simple. What are the modules I want to teach? It's like, oh, well, Fungal Ecology, maybe like kind of like the roles that fungi have in the ecosystem. So what are the stories I want to tell? So I had like module 1 was the intro. Okay, and that ended up being like an intro to mycology and a little bit about like binomial nomenclatures and the taxonomy of fungi. Into, okay, I want to tell the story of the fungal evolution of our planet. To like very broad, what are saprophytes? What are mycorrhizal fungi? What are parasites, right? Like these are very broad things. And then try to tell the stories that are like, okay, but parasites, they can parasitize plants, but they can parasitize fungi even. They can parasitize animals. That's an interesting story. And then trying to just weave a story around like each of the little segments. And then also trying to, and this is the hardest thing, is cut the fat, right? Like in writing, they call it Kill Your Darlings. Because something that I might be very interested in, but it's so niche. Like, and it's really hard to tell a story about. Because I thought for a long time about aquatic fungi, but then it's so hard to tell a big story, and there's so little known yet. And like, I wanted to make it happen. I was like, no, I can't, like, it's just not possible for this right now. So
that's so funny you said that. I was just sent a news article by my dad about aquatic fungi and underwater fungi. He's like, you need to get into this. And I kind of had the same thing. I was trying to find, I know there's a couple researchers doing it. Anyway, that example just triggered me for a second.
I can't even imagine, right? Like think of like, okay, so you have to take a water sample, and then you have to make sure, find these microscopic fungi in the water sample. But if you take them out of the water, they die probably. So you have to deal with all of that. So I don't even know how you would start to study them. And with that, I always try to find collaborators, right? So you mentioned we're here on Lake Atitlan, and we're in Sununa, which is like Kakchikel lands. So there's the indigenous Mayas that still live here. There's actually many different peoples. We have Quiche as well, and Sutuhil. And like these people here, like our neighbors, they have had still such a strong connection to mushrooms, because everybody here during the mushroom season, it goes and finds the La Huachlipilin, which is the Pseudofistulina radicata, which is a hard mushroom to find in the United States, but it's very abundant here. So we actually found like this amazing guy, Reggie, who's actually teaching at the Sacred Mycology Summit, who speaks English, so we can actually introduce him to our student groups who don't speak Spanish. And he wrote like a whole book on like the edible mushrooms, because here they consume over 200 different species of mushrooms in Guatemala.
Whoa.
We also have like a neighbor, Tomasa, who is like been growing mushrooms before Fungi Academy got here. She got like a class, and she used to travel like 3 hours to Shela to get spawn to do this cold water lime pasteurization technique for oyster mushrooms.
Yeah.
And then Oliver met her, and like he super empowered her to focus on mushrooms. And now she lives around the corner, and she gets the spawn from us, and she walks like literally 3 minutes. And we've been teaching her son to do like agar transfers and kind of become like the local mycologist. So like
that's beautiful.
The whole mushroom cultivation process never clicks until we, as a class, go to Tomasa's house, and she's like a dog in the fruiting room, and like it's so low tech, and she's making it work. And that gives people the empowerment of like, oh wow, if literally she can make it do with like there's no humidifier, she just sprays the bag, she's like doesn't have a pressure cooker, then I can make it work probably. And that really is beautiful to find these different voices to represent and to showcase that there's many ways to grow mushrooms, and there's many ways to connect to fungi.
Yeah, and so many times I feel like when you go and create community somewhere, it can feel like it's totally separate from the community it's in, right? It's like isolated and insular. And I love that you guys have like myceliated out and integrated yourself within the broader context of that community and have been open to, whoa, this person has a deeper practice. We need to learn from them, right? I always love kind of flipping that, especially when you're a teacher or something, when you're like used to sharing with people, to always leave yourself open to the flip side of that is, whoa, we have so much still to learn. And it's a constant cycle that keeps feeding itself.
Yeah, it is a constant cycle, man. And like, especially going up with like this lady Ishkik Zavala, and she is like a Mayan wisdom keeper. So she still practices the indigenous cosmovision, and she counts the days. And we met her through some friends. It's like, yo, she's into mushrooms. And like, we go out foraging, and like, I find mushrooms that I had never even seen before. I didn't know they were edible, and she's eating them. But then I'm showing her mycelium and sharing the like what the ecology of the forest is like. And I think there's not much more beautiful than being able to teach each other about the things that you both love, and like having such different backgrounds. And it's a blessing. It's so nice to be here, and like just to be surrounded by people that can teach me so much about all the things that I don't know about.
Yeah, and to have built so many amazing things. And I really liked hearing about, and Make It Stick is definitely going into the library, but hearing about your journey as an educator, because we all need that capacity in our lives. So it's beautiful to hear about tools that we can use to better both learn information, present that information to others, but in your own personal education, what are the topics you're getting into now? Because you've thrown down some of the big, you've made courses on like the entirety of fungal ecology, and I'm sure you've seen like everything, all the different, so much different information. Where are your interests guiding you right now? Where's your curiosity guiding you right now in terms of fungi and things that you're interested in?
That's wow. It's actually something I've been struggling with the last year or so, because I was blessed to have met my mentor, and then like a relatively short time after we met, he passed away, and then like I got so much responsibility of just carrying on the legacy and the mission, and I was learning so much, and then I really was like driven into this fungal ecology rabbit hole, and then we finished that in May, actually a little later, but like around May I was done with most of it, and since then I've been like, okay, what's the next big thing? And I've just been, working on honing my skills as a mushroom cultivator and trying to like create more community events. But I've actually been like had the calling of like, okay, I'm ready for another mentor, and I don't know what it is exactly, what kind of expert. So if you're listening to this and you might be an expert on, I don't know, like ectomycorrhizae cultivation, I'd love to know more. So like, I'm really looking forward to connect more with people that know more about something within the realm of mycology that I can spend some time learning with. Because, it's like the last 5 years, it's been a lot of learning and giving, but I think for now, it's time to just consolidate my own skills. And where that's going to go, I don't know. I'm open to many things. I'm also very interested in like how to apply like mushroom cultivation and mycelium growth for like dealing with agricultural waste. I think in the Fungal Ecology course, we talked about, and I need to know the exact number here because it's a crazy number, that's like, apparently, according to this one paper, we produce like something that of like tens of thousands of kilograms of agricultural waste on the planet, which is like 20,000, no, wait, more kilograms, 20,000 billion, something like this, 20,000 billion, 10,000 billion kilograms, right? That is often being burned. And how do we get it on a fundamental scale that a lot of people are able to grow oyster mushrooms from this? Because that's something I have no experience with, like scaling like a low-tech cultivation technique, which I'm like so interested in, because like here, like we grow it off agricultural waste known as chilote, which is corn cobs, but actually the corn stalk seems to be more bionutritive.
Whoa.
But then like think of wheat stalk, think of all of the like exit of the crops that we grow that like not even get composted these days, but just like get burnt often. We can just grow mushrooms from all of that because it's just like cellulose and lignin, and those are the things that fungi love.
You're ready to start tackling some of the huge problems, and these are all the ideas that so many of us fall in love with, is that capacity to make change. So it's interesting that you've taken a few years of really going deep, learning, sharing, spreading that network, and now maybe it's time for Jasper to find that giant problem that mushrooms may be able to solve, and just like dive into that and pour your energy into that. Yeah, it's funny because once you do take that full view of what mycology is and what mushrooms can do, one of the hardest things to find, and I think I'm echoing the Myco mentor himself, talking about one of the hardest things to find then is a focus. It's like, what do I even focus on? There's so much potential out there. But yeah, that would be a great place to start, because we're still doing so much research right into what those different food sources mean for the final fungus that you grow. Like, what are the properties of that mycelium once they're grown on corn stalk versus wheat straw versus whatever agricultural waste is out there? How can we combine agricultural waste streams and create some like super potent food source that'll lead to the best mycelium for a certain material, or will fruit one of the best mushrooms? So yeah, there's so much rich territory to cover there. Just a reminder for people listening, this is the Mushroom Hour. We're broadcasting live on Petaluma Community Access with Jasper from the Fungi Academy. And anyone listening, I'm sure has gotten inspired by like the work you're doing, the journey you've been on. Where do people go to engage with Fungi Academy?
We're Fungi Academy everywhere. Fungi, Fungi, and then just Academy. FungiAcademy.com, on Instagram, YouTube. This year is like a lot about like making more YouTube content, so it's just free. So I'm stoked about that. We have a really amazing thing coming up, the Sacred Mycology Summit, which I think is the first like big online mycology focused summit. And we have like Dennis McKenna, we have William Padilla Brown, we have a Micro from Southwest Mushrooms, which is an incredible mushroom cultivator, and we have permaculturists. We have like a really amazing lineup. It's completely free. So I think if you want to, like, if you're curious to what we're doing and like kind of what our mission is, that's a great way to get on board. And we're also sharing we have amazing Mayan wisdom keepers. So they're going to share about the Nawalas, the energies of the days. We have actually one of our fungi residents here in our community is a Tsutuhil artist, Tsutu Khan, and he does Maya hip hop. So we have that
amazing
part of it. And we're doing some authentic relating circles as part of the summit. We're doing men and women's circles. And we're trying to create kind of like a Fungi Academy, what we do here in the flesh, but online. And it's going to be free. So at sacredmycology.com. But also if you go to fungiacademy.com, you'll be able to find it.
And I highly encourage everybody who's listening, if this has piqued your interest at all, Fungi Academy is one of those touchstones where I know people can go get good information, safe information, a good environment. Like when people come to, especially the topic of sacred mycology, psilocybe, microdosing, whatever, it's hard to know where to point people a lot of the time. And I think Fungi Academy, along with some others like Oakland Hyphy, you can kind of safely just say, go look at Fungi Academy, do your research. There's so much for you to engage with. So I really want people to have that in kind of their reference stack. It's like, yes, have Fungi Academy in there. And the Sacred Mycology Summit, does sound incredible. And that was actually one of my questions, is if, you in particular, but Fungi Academy brings together so many people in the mycology community, right? On Mushroom Hour, we get to interview people, but I don't know, there's something special about the way you guys engage and like bring people in for workshops and the way you like build this great mycology community. Maybe give a shout out to like one or two people. And as I say that, like, I don't want anyone to feel left out, but maybe one or two people that you or the team there have kind of discovered has come into your field that's been doing great work that might not be like huge on Instagram or TikTok, but is amazing that you're just getting familiar with.
Yeah, well, there's a ton, right? And that's sometimes with events, it's like we try to give like everybody a voice and everybody a platform, and it's sometimes hard to find the people that are big on Instagram, because we're kind of in like a weird desert that like we can't really like mingle and meet those people. But like actually, there's a couple of really amazing educators and cultivators mainly that like we've gotten into contact with that not a lot of people know about. So first off, like we've been working with this guy for a while. He's been focusing on his own project, Paul from Fungi, and he has a YouTube channel that's doing pretty well. And he is legit a mushroom cultivation genius. Like he is so good at making liquid culture and grain spawn and coming up with these creative inventions that like I've not really seen people. I think a lot of people, mushroom cultivators, sometimes get stuck in like what works, and of course there's a lot of innovators and all that stuff. But like every time I'm hanging out with him, I'm learning something like ridiculous. So he's within our vibe because I think his business is Fungi. There's two Fungias. There's Fungi Farms. He's also amazing, but
that's what I was thinking of.
Walla Walla. That's the confusing thing. There's also another Fungi Academy now. There's the Tropical Fungi Academy in Hawaii. So I think all the mushroom puns and all the mushroom names are drying up real quick with the shroom boom.
Yeah, right.
So, but this is Fungi Walla Walla, and he has an amazing free YouTube channel. So I would definitely recommend checking that out. And I think Fungi is also just like a straight up like nonprofit and donation-based business as much as you can. So that's right up in our ethos. And it's really fun actually to see that like people that like were maybe less known a couple years ago that we've been working with for a while have blown up. Like I think Darren LeBaron is a great example of that. We've been working with Talia Gosiako, and her business is Lacuna Medicinals. And she actually came to our human mycelium retreat, and she's like a super badass young female like mushroom cultivator, and she's running like a massive operation of like gourmet mushrooms in San Diego. And you don't like, I'm just stoked because you don't see that enough in my opinion, right? Like some badass like female mushroom cultivating bosses. And like she's been teaching with us now since 2023, and like I also learned so much from her because I peeked into the life of a like large scale mushroom operation, but I've never fully done that myself. And I think there's just so much to learn from doing that. And another like, and this is when you get into scientists, right? But like Dr. Mark Anthony, he's a mycorrhizal expert. He taught in our Fungal Ecology course. You know, a lot of scientists are really good scientists, but a lot of them are not really good teachers. And he is like such a phenomenal teacher. I was so blown away by his presentation. So those are like the three I would say is Paul from Fungi. I don't think he shares his last name. Talia Gosiako from
Lacuna Medicinals.
Lacuna, that's it, you're right. And then Dr. Mark Anthony. Those are some of my hidden gems for you.
Beautiful. That's the word I was thinking of when I asked the question, the hidden gems, people in mycology that we might not be appreciating already. Great ones to add to the list. And of course, I'm greedy. Those are like people I want to know about if I'm going to do a show so I love that. And I guess, in navigating social media spaces, Fungi Academy has been doing it for a long time. You guys have a pretty massive online presence. You said we're in the middle of this shroom boom. How do you stay grounded amidst all that? Do you guys talk about that as you're charting your course? Like, obviously that's part of it as a business, is you have to be visible, but then you also don't want to get neurotic about it and like fall into these weird competition things. And how have you navigated that? Maybe it's not an issue, but how have you kind of navigated that landscape, that social media landscape, as like a big organization, and for you, a big personality in the mycology community?
Yeah, it's with those questions, I ask myself, is like, what do fungi do in ecosystems, right? And like that's something that like I'm more and more inclined to like share. And like that's actually something I wish we touched on a little bit more during this conversation. But this, we can talk for weeks and we probably not run out of interesting things to share. But like how do we apply how fungi act in ecosystems to our own human reality, right? And when I look at fungi, why they're so successful is because they collaborate so much, right? Look at lichens. Lichens have been around for
Mm.
600 million years, and they've just basically created a perfect little greenhouse for algae or cyanobacteria to that are like beautiful, like getting sugar from the sun. Yeah, like how do we do that in like our human reality? How can we work together? How can we create symbiotic relationships with one another? And I think that's been our focus of doing that and like helping others. And I think helping others is inherently selfish. And like again, I learned this from fungi because maybe
Mm.
we learn about like mycorrhizal fungi growing towards the roots of plants, and then there's some biochemical like interaction that takes place that we don't really fully know what happens. I think Peter McCoy jokingly called it my consent, which I think is really beautiful. But I think from a lot of people, it's like this barter attitude, right? Or the fungi coming with something like, hey, I have phosphorus, I have nitrogen, I have water, but I want your sugar you got from being a plant, right? Through photosynthesis. And I think that's wrong. I think actually a fungi might come with like, yo, I have water, nitrogen, phosphorus. You just have it. Because in my reality, right, if your neighbor that you know really well, and this is really funny, we all like live in different worlds sometimes, but comes to your door and gives you a banana bread. And the next day, a homemade sourdough. And the next day, a cake. A lot of people would think, what do they want?
Yeah.
But in reality, like, what's my initial response? If we're not like thinking too much of like the traumatized version of ourselves, it's like, I want to do something back, right? And like, I read this amazing book about anthropology. I forgot the name of the book, but this quote stuck of this anthropologist somewhere in sub-Saharan Africa asking this guy that got like a lot of fish, where are you going to store all this fish? It's like, store this fish. The only place to store my fish is in the belly of my brother.
Mm.
With the intent, of course, if his brother catches a lot of like deer or finds a lot of fruit somewhere, who's he going to share it with? Of course, the person like got free fish from. So to me, those are all make sense in like
Yeah.
the ecology to work together, and that is my approach. That being said, I'm not perfect. I sometimes look at like somebody making a good YouTube video and actually being successful. It's like, oh, I want 1 million views on my YouTube video. That shit happens to me. But like then I'm like, wait, really? And like I try to
Right.
practice like the things I learned in meditation of being able to like step away from that thought and therefore step away from that emotion. But yeah, it's basically for me, I want to collaborate with as many nodes in the mycelial network as possible. And with that being said, like I learn more and more about people in the States that I've never met that seem to have a very biased opinion about us. Especially, I'm a European here in Guatemala, and I understand that can cause a lot of resentment and frustration and all those things. And if you heard my story earlier on, like I'd never really fully like chose. Oh, I'm gonna be in Guatemala. Like life just kept dealing me cards, and we try to give as much back to the community by empowering them, by like sharing the abundance that we get from our courses, by taking them to their low grow operation, by having them guide us through mushroom forays. But like, yeah, that is also part of it, and that sometimes make me sad. And then like, especially when it seems to be a big group of people, but I've never heard anything. I've never talked to anybody of those people. So I invite, if you're one of those people that might feel that you heard something about us, like feel free to just reach out. It's our like emails connect at fungiacademy.com if you feel like we can do better, because that's all we can do. Like we're just doing our best. I
Mm.
like to do better. Like I just turned 30. I sometimes don't know what I'm doing, like most people, and I would love to know more about how we can create a better world for the next generation. That's all I'm here for, And if we can share the magical fungal wisdom and get more people on the myco train, then I'm like really happy.
Well, you always put out good vibes for me, and what a like humble way to approach that, and rather an insightful way to approach that. Getting it back to basics for any mushroom heads is like, yeah, how would fungus navigate these relationships? The trading analogy, an interesting way to put that is like, what if it's not a direct barter for this, but hey, I give what I have to you, with the understanding and the trust that we're all going to give what we have to each other, and we don't need to haggle and constantly be like weighing the scales of who's getting more in a given push-pull of a relationship, whether that be an interpersonal or a parasocial relationship, like what happens with a big account like Fungi Academy. And I think so many people can relate to kind of how you frame that and the really earnest way, the really like honest and open place that you're coming from. So beautiful. What a potent thing to share to wrap this interview up. Jasper, thank you so much for joining us on the Mushroom Hour. Like you said, it's been a long time coming, and this was just like the first of many, I hope, for Jasper Fungi Academy Mushroom Hour interviews in the future. But thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Darren. And I kind of had like a glimpse of the future. We're both in our 60s, and we're just like, oh, yeah, here we are. We're back at the Mushroom Hour. Can I end with like an idea that like was passed down to me by Oliver, which I think he shared about in your interview, and that's like I think another fungal archetype that I think really can land an impact. And if we look at the world in this way, we might live in a very different world tomorrow. Is that helping others is inherently selfish, and not only for the reason I shared that, but if everybody around you is sick, you're gonna be sick. If everybody around you is healthy. Let's say everybody around you in like 100-mile radius has the purchasing power of a multimillionaire. Would you lock your bike? No. Because like everybody can just buy 100 bikes without thinking twice about it, right? And that's the world that fungi have created, right? Fungi have basically terraformed this planet in abundance of trees, and then the trees dies and they eat the dead trees, right? And like the animals eat the fruits of the trees, and then the animals the spores of the fungi, and like that's kind of that beautiful homeostasis that we can create, right? By help. It starts as simple as by helping others, because if everybody around us is thriving, we will thrive. There's no doubt about that. But it's way harder to be in your highest self, as people like to call it, if you're surrounded by sick people. So that's like definitely one of the more powerful lessons of Oliver that I like to share with everybody while closing this up.
Now that's the perfect closing note. We can embody the fungal abundance, and with that, create more abundance for our human communities. Seriously, Jasper, what a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us on Mushroom Hour.
It's been a pleasure, Darren. Thank you for having me.